All right, it's now 10 past 9. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shane Slater. I'm a Senior Standards Development Officer at the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session on understanding the WTO agreement on technical barriers to trade, the role of the inquiry point, and notifying authority in Jamaica. Thank you for taking the time out to be with us. We hope that it will be an enlightening and informative session. Purpose of this webinar is to strengthen your awareness and understanding of the WTO agreement on technical barriers to trade and to provide greater insight into the roles of Jamaica's National Inquiry Point and the notifying authority. We also hope to use this session to highlight the importance of stakeholder engagement in the notification and consultation processes that support transparency and facilitate trade. So before we proceed, just a few housekeeping matters. Please remember to keep your cameras turned off and your microphones muted during the presentations to minimize distractions and background noise. And the session is being recorded for reference and reporting purposes. Now, the presentations delivered by our presenters will be shared with you following the webinar, and you are welcome to submit your questions in the chat using the chat feature. And during the Q&A segment, we'll be reading those questions on your behalf. You may also use the raise hand feature, and once you are acknowledged, you may unmute your microphone and pose your question or comment directly to the presenters. So thank you for respecting these housekeeping matters so that we can maintain an engaging and orderly session. Now, to officially open today's webinar, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Felton Gooden, the Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, to deliver the opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Gooden.
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen. And on behalf of Standards Jamaica, express pleasure to officially you to today's webinar, the World Trade Organization Agreement on the Technical Barriers Trade and the Importance of the National Inquiry and Notification Authority within Jamaica's trade framework. Now, I am to see representatives as I look across from government agencies, representatives from the private sector, manufacturers, importers, they are represented from academia, so conformity assessment, and of course, consumer interest groups that are all gathered today. Your participation demonstrates a shared commitment to in Jamaica's capacity effectively in international trade. As global become increasingly integrated, technical regulation standards, conformity assessment requirements have a significant impact on competitiveness. While these measures are necessary to protect health, safety, and the as well as the consuming public, they must also be developed and implemented in a transparent manner that does not create unnecessary barriers to trade. The WTO-TBT agreement provides a framework to achieve this balance. It transparency, encourages the use of standards, and opportunities for countries like Jamaica and stakeholders to review, comment on proposed measures before actually adopted. For Jamaica, these mechanisms are really important. Why? Because they guide our regulators manufacturers or export other stakeholders access to critical information, proposed regulations in markets of interest, allowing them to make changes, access potential impact, participate in the international that shapes trading requirements. As WTO, TBT, national point, the Bureau of Jamaica is a key role in getting access to this and supporting stakeholder engagement. Alongside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, which Jamaica notifying authority, we help ensure Jamaica fulfills its obligation under the WTO agreement while providing valuable support to local industry as local regulators. So what can we do from today's webinar? Well, today's webinar is to increase awareness and understanding of these functions and to demonstrate how stakeholders can actively participate in TBT process and advance Jamaica's interests. Through reviewing notifications, or perhaps some comments, or you may be utilizing tools such as the EPING, stakeholder engagement, in critical effectiveness of the system that is in place. Therefore, I use this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, as you engage with us to participate in today's discussion. You may have questions arising from the presentation will be made. And so if you want to get further clarification, we need to ask those relevant questions and to explore how information shared can support the organization's objectives because broader trade and development. I would like to express sincere appreciation to our presenters who will be presenting after me for sharing their expertise, and to all participants in your continued interest strengthening Jamaica's trade competitiveness and regulatory transparency. There, I wish you active and informative webinar. Thank you very much, and please the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gooden, for those insightful remarks and setting the background and context for today's discussion. Now, before we get into the main presentations, we'll be hearing from representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, as well as the BSJ. And to deliver these short presentations, we have from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, the Ambassador Esmond Reid, Undersecretary for Trade in the Foreign Trade Division, and they'll be followed by Mrs. Sharika Satchel Knight from the BSJ.
Mr. Moderator, Dr. Velton Gooden, Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards of Jamaica, our guest presenters, Ms. Sutter and Mr. Locks from the World Trade Organization, trade stakeholders, friends all. A very warm Jamaican good morning to you all. I also want to bring greetings on behalf of the Minister and the Minister of State, the Permanent Secretary, and all of us here at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. So let me start by acknowledging that in an increasingly interconnected global trading environment, transparency, predictability, and cooperation are essential pillars of a rules-based multilateral trading system. In this regard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in its capacity as Jamaica's national notification authority under the World Trade Organization's Agreement on Technical Barriers to Trade, plays a critical role in advancing Jamaica's trade interests while supporting the effective implementation of international trade obligations. As the designated notification authority, the ministry serves as the official conduit between Jamaica and the WTO Secretariat on matters relating to transparency under the TBT agreement. So, what are the primary functions of the ministry in its role as notification authority? There are primarily two functions. The first one is notification and compliance. And under this function, the ministry coordinates the notification of proposed technical regulations and conformity assessment procedures, ensuring that Jamaica meets its international obligations and contributes to a transparent and predictable global trading environment. Secondly, there is a role for information sharing and stakeholder engagement. In this role, the ministry disseminates notifications received from WTO members to relevant national stakeholders, including ministries, departments, and agencies, academia, civil society, and other bodies, and also facilitates the submission of comments on measures that may have implications for Jamaica's trade interests. So, taking all of that into account, the ministry fosters collaboration among regulatory authorities, standards bodies, private sector entities, and other stakeholders, ensuring that Jamaican perspectives are effectively reflected in international trade discussions. So, of course, today's engagement is indeed a reflection of that role. As in our role as the notifying authority, we collaborate effectively with the Bureau of Standards of Jamaica, which is the inquiry point, so that we can more directly and comprehensively engage with national stakeholders. Of course, we are very much happy to have support from the World Trade Organization in this exercise. So, the ministry also promotes awareness and understanding of TBT-related developments, thereby enabling stakeholders to respond proactively to evolving regulatory requirements in export markets. So let's look at the benefits of an effective notification system. An effective notification system offers significant benefits for Jamaican exporters and producers. It provides early access to information on proposed external technical regulations and standards that may affect market access, thereby allowing sufficient time to assess potential impacts and for them to adapt their operations as necessary. Stakeholders are also afforded the opportunity to provide input on proposed measures before they enter into force, thereby helping to safeguard Jamaica's commercial interests and enhance competitiveness. In addition, the transparency mechanisms established under the TBT agreement contribute to greater certainty in international trade. They strengthen confidence among trading partners, reduce the risk of trade disputes, and support the integration of Jamaican businesses into regional and global value chains. in fulfilling its responsibilities as National Notification Authority, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade remains fully committed to promoting transparency, facilitating dialogue, and advancing Jamaica's participation in the multilateral trading system. We recognize that as a small vulnerable economy, or SVE, the notification requirements for Jamaica are sometimes onerous, but the ministry remains fully committed to discharging its responsibilities under the agreement on TBT to the best of its abilities. So, in conclusion, through transparency, cooperation, and proactive engagement, we can ensure that Jamaican businesses are better equipped to navigate an evolving regulatory environment and are able to seize opportunities in an increasingly competitive global market space. Thanks very much for your attention, and my very best wishes for a successful and informative program of engagement on technical barriers to trade in today's encounter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much also for the opportunity to present on the regional and international trade branch of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, following that presentation from Ambassador Esmond Reid. As was mentioned by Ambassador Reid, there is great collaboration between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. And so much of what you would have heard from Ambassador will be repeated again, not exhaustively, but just to show the links that are between both the ministry and the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. Just want to mention very briefly that the Bureau of Standards Jamaica is a statutory body and is an agency of the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. We operate under the Standards Act of 1968, and there are several other acts that guide our mandate and our responsibilities as well. Bureau functions based on our mandate to facilitate business development and trade, promote and maintain the international competitiveness of our Jamaican products and services, and support consumer production. To go specifically to the role of the regional and international trade branch, there are several key areas of focus for us. For example, we support and provide logistics for BSJ's events or other international and regional events, as well as local, regional, and international project support, provide support to the processing of overseas travels for BSJ, NCRA, and NCBJ, and also with maintaining membership in regional and international organization. But for the purposes of this webinar, the main function that we would want to highlight is that as the World Trade Organization, technical barriers to trade inquiry points of Jamaica. So the BSJ has been designated the World Trade Technical Barriers to Trade National Inquiry Points of Jamaica under the World Trade Organization Technical Barriers to Trade Agreement. What that means is we function, as Ambassador Reid has mentioned, to receive notification through the ePing platform that is available, where persons who are proposing their proposed regulations send those notifications through this ePing point. We receive those and we disseminate to our local stakeholders, thereby helping persons to be able to see and access information related to new requirements that are being proposed through these notifications. If persons are able to if the full text was not made available, we can, through our inquiry point to the other inquiry points of the countries, request that information. Additionally, if there are questions or queries that members may have to the notified members, we, as the Inquiry Points of Jamaica, assist with providing those comments on behalf of Jamaican stakeholders. Just like Ambassador Reid said, we also engage in stakeholder engagements, workshops, meetings, seminars like these to help persons to understand the regulations that are being proposed. And certainly, we help persons to engage in helping to, helping to provide information to the rulemaking process. Imagine as Jamaican stakeholders, we are able to provide commentary on the different proposed regulations that will be taken into consideration as the proposals are being finalized. So, based on the services we offer, persons are able to access the regulations. We also provide technical assistance with understanding the components of some of the regulations, whether it is through our experts or training facilities, or sessions such as these where persons are able to provide information directly from whether it is regulatory spaces or agencies or organizations such as the World Trade Organization. As was mentioned, stakeholder consultations, because the heart of being able to function effectively and to meet the requirements lies with our stakeholders being able to understand and to implement the regulations and the requirements. So these sessions are important in helping persons to solidify the information that they would have with a view of being able to implement. As a part of our role also, which is in tandem with another function of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, we also help to prepare facilities when they do have inspections from regulators, whether NCRA, which is the local regulators, the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, or regulators from, for example, the United States. And so we do pre-inspection visits as well as we observe the inspections of the different regulatory functions. So we provide support in every way that we are able to. As the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, we also provide links to other business support providers so that wherever along the chain of implementation you are, you will get the correct support that you need from the agency with those responsibilities. As was mentioned also, we represent the national concerns at local, international, and regional fora as well. So the concerns that are voiced are transmitted in the right meeting forum so that they can be acknowledged and addressed as is necessary. There are also times when we are able to provide support to projects and we identify needs of our stakeholders and support the development and implementation of projects to strengthen the capacity and drive compliance. And certainly, as was mentioned before, information sessions such as these so that our stakeholders can be kept abreast of the regulatory updates and best practices and opportunities. We also share with our stakeholders the different testing and services that are provided by the Bureau of Standards by way of calibration, standards development, certification and accreditation support, and testing through our microbe chemistry and packaging labs. So whatever service it is that persons might need in fulfilling the requirements of the different regulations, both locally and internationally, we help to point you in the right direction through the regional and international trade branch so that you can get the support that is required. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. We hope it would have provided a little more information on the support provided by the Bureau of Standards as we function as the National Inquiry Point of Jamaica. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight, and Ambassador Reid for sharing this background as it pertains to the roles and functions of the BSJ and the ministry. So now we will go into our main event, and we are delighted to have two experts from the WTO to deliver the two main presentations today. So I'll quickly introduce them. We have Laura Locks, He has been working at the WTO Secretariat since 2002. He's currently the legal counselor at the WTO's Trade and Environment Division, where he provides legal and policy assistance to members and committees, mainly with respect to regulatory matters on the agreement on TBT, including the context of trade disputes. And previously, he served as a counselor at the WTO's Legal Affairs Division, and before that, the Intellectual Property Division. He's also worked on legal trade matters in law firms across the USA and Brazil, and has a Bachelor of Law and a Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy, and a Master of Law in Intellectual Property Law from the George Washington University Law School. And following him, we will have Bianca Angela Zuta. She is a e-paying officer at the WTO, where she supports the management and promotion of the e-paying platform. She has extensive experience in capacity building, digital learning, and stakeholder engagement, having previously worked in the WTO's Institute for Training and Technical Cooperation. And throughout her career, she has designed and delivered trade-related training programs for government officials, private sector representatives, academics, and researchers. And in her current role, she keeps stakeholders abreast of the effective use of WTO transparency mechanisms and the e-ping platform to monitor regulatory developments and participate more effectively in international trade. So please welcome them. Before we go into the first presentation, please turn your attention to the short video from the WTO.
Imagine you have found the perfect bike helmet to buy online. Lightweight, durable, and stylish. But there is a problem. It cannot be sold in your country. Not because it's unsafe, it has already been certified safe in its country of origin. The issue? It hasn't passed your local safety tests. In other words, the certification from the country of origin does not count. The helmet must be tested again by a different lab under a different certification system, even though the safety requirements may be the same. Of course, the goal is still to protect cyclists, but repeated testing adds time, cost, and complexity without necessarily making the products any safer. Governments set technical requirements for a variety of legitimate reasons: to protect consumers, ensure safety, or provide reliable information. The challenge is that producers trying to sell the same product in multiple markets often must adapt to different rules, testing methods, or certification systems. For producers and exporters, these differences can be costly and time-consuming, and for smaller businesses, these barriers can keep their products out of markets altogether. Think about a simple wooden toy for children. One country limits the type of paint that can be used, another specifies how big the detachable parts can be, and a third requires warning symbols permanently marked on the toy itself. Each rule aims to protect children's safety. That's essential. But when these technical regulations differ across markets, manufacturers may need to redesign the same toy multiple times, changing materials, sizes, or markings, even when the toy already meets high safety standards. This is where the WTO's Agreement on Technical Barriers to Trade, known as the TBT Agreement, plays a key role. It helps ensure that technical regulations, standards, and conformity assessment procedures, such as testing and certification, achieve their goals without becoming too burdensome. Since its entry into force in 1995, the WTO's TBT agreement has helped economies manage differences in technical requirements and testing procedures. It covers all products and is built around a few core principles that can help governments regulate more effectively. Non-discrimination. The same rules should apply to domestic and imported products and to all trading partners. Necessity. Technical requirements should be no more trade restrictive than necessary to achieve legitimate objectives such as safety, health or environmental protection. Harmonization. WTO members are strongly encouraged to use international standards so that safe products don't need to be redesigned for every market. And lastly, transparency. Governments should notify when they are planning new technical regulations, giving others time to provide feedback or ask questions. Since 1995, over 55,000 TBT notifications have been shared through the WTO, making technical regulations more transparent and predictable. They are all accessible on the WTO's EPING platform. For over 30 years, the TBT Committee has kept the TBT agreement dynamic. Let me explain. The TBT Committee is where WTO members share experiences, develop practical guidance, and improve transparency tools that make technical regulations accessible to all. It is also where they can raise specific trade concerns, discuss problems early on, and work towards solutions. The TBT agreement is about getting the balance right. Regulations that keep us safe and informed without becoming too burdensome. Is there a trade term you've always wanted explained in simple terms? Drop your question in the comments. We are here to break it down. Let's make trade clearer, fairer, and easier to understand.
All right, so we'll be handing over to Mr. Locks. Just as a reminder, we'll be taking your questions using the chat, and following the presentation, we'll have a Q&A where we will read those questions and get those answers. So over to you, Mr. Locks.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me first before anything? Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shane. And also, let me, on behalf of my colleague Angela and the WTO Secretariat, thank Jamaica for organizing this virtual seminar on this important topic of TBT. And also thanks Dr. Gooden, Ambassador Reid, and Ms. Knight for their remarks. They really made our job easier, because I think you, together with my colleague Mateo, you already have, we can start with in a very, very substantive footing. And I think many things that has been said before, I will be repeated, but I think it's important to go back to some of the core principles that have been mentioned. And just before I start my presentation, I think the intention is to present for around 45 minutes. Let's see if I can keep myself within the time, and then leave time for Q&As if that's possible. But I think a couple of concepts were mentioned by the previous speakers. The idea, the important role of standards as a development tool, the importance of transparency, international cooperation, and indeed, and I will go back to that in my presentation, the World Bank in last March released a very, very important report that I recommend all of you to read. It's a very substantive report on the role of standards for developments and standards in all its dimensions, but including, importantly, the TBT dimension of it, regulation of products through and standards and certification. And they use interesting terminology to encapsulate the importance of standards, and which kind of link to what had already been said by the previous speakers. For example, they say that standards are a springboard for development, that they are a quiet catalyst for economic development, and also promoters of international cooperation. But TBT standards are tools. In the end of the day, what all countries want is development, safer products, and healthier economy, etc. So it's also how you use those tools based on your own reality. So the purpose of my presentation here is to go back to certain elements that were already mentioned, but try to explain in what the TBT and the TBT committee can contribute to this important role. So if you bear with me a little bit, let me just share my presentation here. And please let me know if you can see it. Just 1 second, please. Just 1 second. Share. I knew this would happen. It was all fine when we tested, and then when you want to use it, you cannot find the just 1 sec. Maybe if I do this presentation, just 1 second, please. The computer's having some problem opening the. I think it's yeah, I think it's not. It's not. Is it? Can you see now?
Yes, we're seeing the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Apologies for that. Yeah, so the idea is to give you a brief overview of the main provisions of the TBT agreement, the TBT committee, but maybe I think it's important to start a little bit from the big picture perspective here. What are standards and regulations, and what is their relationship with international trade? Are they a bad thing, a good thing, both at the same time? I think, being a lawyer, people get irritated when we always respond, it depends. So it's the same thing with standards. They can be a powerful springboard for development. They can create wealth. They can promote healthier and safer societies. But it all depends on how you use and adopt them. So because if it's not well done, they can hinder international trade, but even more importantly, they can result in bad policy and outcomes for societies. So, and one thing about standards, and when I say standards from the point of view of the TBT agreement, which is about regulations and standards affecting trading products. So we're not talking about here about services, intellectual property, all other forms of non-tariff measures covered by other agreements of the WTO. Still, they are very more and more present in everyday life of everybody, people, companies, and because these products can pose risks, there is a more and more need from consumers, demand for having more information about products. So there is this need of market intervention or intervention in the economy to protect consumers or with respect of a wide range of situations. And this is, of course, translated into different types of standards and affecting many types of products, all covered by the TBT agreement, from safety belts, labeling, tobacco packaging and labeling requirements, quality of plastic in bottles, toys. So one consideration and concern of the TBT agreement, because TBT is part of the WTO, and WTO is about international trade, is that in one hand, the way you adopt and apply those standards to address policy concerns, environment, health, safety, it's totally recognized, it's totally accepted and legitimate. But at the same time, they can pose formidable barriers to trade. You can have very stringent regulatory product requirements that will be almost equivalent of a ban. And we are not talking here about tariffs, we're talking about regulations. But one important thing is that under the TBT logic, even if a regulation is very stringent and powerful, and can even stop trade altogether, that in and of itself is not a problem. The problem is what is the justification, the proportionality issues that my colleague Matteo mentioned in the video. And as we will see, and if the colleagues from Jamaica that attend the TBT committee and follow the work of the committee closely, certainly know the type of situations and the regulatory situations that the agreement cover are really, really vast. And here I'm just going to present some examples of very innovative and also, quote unquote, controversial regulations that were discussed in the committee and even became disputes in the WTO under the TBT agreement, for example, on plain packaging for tobacco. On animal welfare is another type of regulation when you want to address in the way you manufacture products, if that affected the well-being of animals, if animals were slaughtered, for example, in a humane way. We had a dispute on seal-based products against the EU, for example. It was also discussed in the TBT committee. Lots of issues on food and health. I think there is a misunderstanding sometimes that TBT is more about machines and trains and computers, but actually it's also about agricultural products and food, but not from the perspective of another similar agreement, the agreement to sanitary phytosanitary measures, but for example, in situations like labeling for nutrition labeling. So there's a lot of discussions in the TBT committee on foods and beverages in terms of nutrition and consumer information. So this is another example of actual committee. We never had a dispute, but lots of discussions in the committee, lots of notifications. Another, I wouldn't say new area, but I think as a growing area, are standards for to address environmental issues, including climate change, biofuels. In fact, in July, in 2 weeks, we're going to have a thematic sessions in the TBT committee on international standards for biofuels. We had lots of discussions in the committee on, for example, one measure by a member on whether biofuel is sustainable in terms of invading forests, even indirectly. We had even a dispute by Malaysia and Indonesia on palm oil, if it is eligible or not under the renewable directive of the EU in terms of sustainability and impact on forests. As I said, many different types of environmental labeling. This is a major area of discussion, and so on and so forth. The field of application of TBT in practice is really vast. As I said, much things well beyond just the traditional and most well-known issues of safety and quality, but also, as I already mentioned, morality, animal welfare, even religion, lots of debates and notifications on halal standards for food, that, the rules that according to Islamic precepts as well, because it may affect imports of poultry and other food products by other countries. So it's a very wide scope of the agreement. And standards have been always important. But one thing that comes across from our own observation, the work of the TBT committee, but also this recent 2025 report of the World Bank, that standards even more so are important today. Regulations and standards and the way they impact trade, because the world is even more and more interconnected. Lots of value chain, global value chain, global manufacturing chain that needs to be working smoothly. And if standards are not harmonized or countries in the chain do not have standards and regulations that are really fit for purpose, attending the objectives, but yet not going beyond what is necessary, non-discriminatory, they will be kept out of these important value chain. And here again, an example of the developmental dimension of doing, standards correctly. The WTO represents 98.2% of global merchandise trade, and let me jump to this slide here. And as this World Bank report clearly demonstrates and states, today 90% of the world trade is affected in one way or another by the so-called non-tariff measures, but most importantly, standards, either from the perspective of TBT or the SPS agreement. So, and this is quite important in particular for low and middle income countries. How to address that offensively, but also defensively. So now, I want to zoom, slowly zooming in into the TBT agreement in the TBT committee, of course, but just to give you this broader background. The WTO has many functions. The three core functions are dispute settlements, then negotiations. This is where the WTO add new rules. And they added, of course, in 1994, when the WTO was created, the TBT agreement with one of the 30 or so rules on technical barriers to trade, but importantly, implementation. So the implementation is the work of the TBT committee to implement and clarify and facilitate the implementation of all these rules on technical barriers to trade. And of course, technical assistance, that is what I'm doing this today. Now, just still on the big picture, but more on the TBT agreement. TBT agreement and all other disciplines of the WTO on non-tariff measures, but TBT agreement in particular. And I think this is an important point that I cannot stress enough. It's concerned not with absolute free trade. A better statement is that the TBT agreement is about freer trade. And when I mention freer trade, it means if the regulation to protect the environment, if it is about life and death, you don't want, and is not the ambition of the TBT agreement to promote trade, free trade, no matter what, even if people are killed. It's about you want to protect the health and safety of your citizens. This is a legitimate objective protected by and recognized by the agreement, but it's more how you do it, because there may be more than one way to effectively address a policy concern, and perhaps one of the ways is better and yet less trade restrictive, non-discriminatory. So the ER here, the freer, is with respect of that part. Put in another way, TBT is not about if a member should regulate, it's only about how a member should regulate. So it's, I think, a better term is not that TBT is about free trade in absolute terms, is about freer trade, is about safer trade. So, and I think we always like to show the balance that overall, all provisions and obligations of the TBT agreement, rights and obligations, and all the work and guidance of the TBT committee, that's one picture encapsulating what all these rules and practices together, what they aim. So they aim, in one hand, to allow members to preserve their regulatory autonomy, recognize that all governments, all members have freedom to regulate, to save lives, to protect the environment, in one hand, and on the other hand, while doing that, avoiding unnecessary obstacles to trade. The TBT agreement only kicks in when a member decides to regulate. It's not a positive integration agreement. So there is no requirement for any member to regulate anything. It's only when a member decides that, which, as I said, a member is free to do so, then the agreement kicks in with certain good regulatory practices to increase the chance that when members do that, they don't do it in a disproportional or more trade restrictive way, that they do it in a way that is non-discriminatory, that they do in a way that without reinventing the wheel. And that's what my colleague Matteo mentioned in the video, the pillar of the TBT agreement of harmonization. And also, I think, very important pillar, more than most of the other WTO agreements, except perhaps the SPS, is the idea of transparency. As I think the Ambassador Reid mentioned, and Dr. Gooden, the idea that the TBT applies early on, and my colleague Angela will explain in more details, with respect of the regulatory life cycle of regulations, targeting drafts, everything early on, so you can really ensure that you had a lot of inputs and make as better regulation as possible, first and foremost in terms of health and safety, but also in terms of impact on trade. And in doing all of this together, the idea is that you will end up with a measure that, regulation and standard that can fulfill fully the policy objectives and not being trade restrictive, too much, disproportional and discriminatory. And in doing so, you even avoid friction with your trade partners. Now, of course, I don't have time to explain in detail every single of those key principles of the agreement. My colleague Matteo already very nicely and quickly mentioned, but I will repeat again. Of course, non-discrimination with respect of the three TBT measures that I will explain shortly what they are. It's a key principle of all WTO agreements, and simply means that in principle, again, even this obligation is not absolute if you have a way to justify why you discriminate between members, and many times there is a justification. But in principle, you should treat all imported products like your products in terms of the regulation, and also your trade partners. If you treat one trade partner in one way, you should treat the product of the other trade partner in the same way. But of course, if there are justification, if there are policies justification for this different treatment, that's also possible. So it's not also an absolute situation. For example, if your country speaks English and you're asking all labels to be in the national language, a country that speaks, let's say, Spanish and is sending a product cannot complain that this is unjustifiable discrimination, because there is, of course, a policy basis to do that, because the product has to be understandable, the labels for the consumers of your English-speaking country. So there is flexibility even in terms of non-discrimination, but the core idea is that, you should, if there is no explanation, you cannot discriminate. Transparency, I think Angela will mention in more detail, so I will just move to the next one, which is, I think it's one of the unique obligations as compared to other WTO agreements, because the GATT, for example, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, is mostly concerned with discrimination. And in the TBT agreement, even if a regulation is non-discriminatory, but if it is disproportional, quote unquote, in other words, if it affects trade more than is necessary, because, for example, there are other options, rather than banning, why you don't label, for example, that can attain the same objective, you have to favor those. And linked to that is the principle of harmonization for various reasons. If there is already a way that had been adopted by a technical international body, or solving and addressing a problem, a regulatory problem, you should normally don't reinvent the wheel. And in principle, again, the agreement allows countries to deviate when this is not possible because you want a higher level of protection, or what has been adopted internationally is not effective, is not appropriate. But the rule is that you should not reinvent the wheel and base your measure on a standard, international standard. This is, I think countries have been doing this even before the TBT agreement existed, because if there is one way to do something to address a risk in the best way possible, why you will try to find another way? But the TBT agreement gets that idea and then says, if you base your regulation standard in an international standard, it probably increases the chance that you strike that balance between freedom to regulate and not being discriminatory, more trade restrictive than necessary, and you even get a presumption for that. For trade, the important benefit is something that also in the video Matteo mentioned, is the regulatory fragmentation. If we're not for harmonization via international standards, especially a small and medium-sized enterprise wanting to export, let's say, toys for 10 different countries, and if 10 different countries have 10 different measures, you have to adapt your production for 10 different ways. And this fragmentation, different regulations for different export markets in itself is a trade barrier, because it increases, and again, the impact is most felt for small companies, increases the compliance costs. Whereas if you have these 10 countries with the same type of toy regulation, is much easier and less costly. The agreement also has other tools like encouragement for equivalence and mutual recognition. So this is not about international standards, but it's about global regulatory coherence more in the sense of certification, in the sense that if your one product is certified in one member, that certification will be accepted in other members, rather than having to make 10 different certifications and tests in labs in 10 different markets. Again, I think in particularly important for small and medium-sized companies. So the agreement does not mandate mutual recognition, but strongly encourages and has some parameters under which members can negotiate mutual recognition. And finally, because Jamaica is a developing country, in Articles 11 and 12 mainly, the agreement has many rights for developing countries in terms of, one, requesting technical assistance, not by us, but not to us, but to other members on various aspects of the TBT obligations, to help them comply with those and apply as efficiently as possible, and also on flexibilities in terms of the impact the technical regulations and standards of other markets may have on developing countries' products, and they have to take those into account. Now, a lot of words here, but just to say that TBT agreement, it's an interesting agreement in the sense that in terms of the scope of the objectives of the policy concerns or the risks it covers is very, very wide. As I said, it can be from religion and morality to interoperability, to quality, to safety, to food, to agricultural products, many, many situations, but it's very narrow in the type of measures that members adopt to address those policy concerns when they come from products. So basically, the agreement covers 3 types of measures: technical regulations, standards, and conformity assessment procedures. And standards and technical regulations, basically in terms of their content, they do the same thing. They lay down specifications for policy reasons or labeling requirements, or they regulate the way products are produced. And so, for example, if you say that paint cannot contain lead, it's a technical specification in the negative to address human health, right? And you're laying down product characteristics. So it's basically that what they do. Or if a member is saying, tobacco products have to have these graphic health warnings, this is another type of specification of product requirement. So both standards technical regulation under these big definitions here that you can see now, they do the same thing. The key difference is that technical regulations complying with those specifications is mandatory, whereas for standards is voluntary. Many times countries start with a governmental standard which is voluntary, but then over time they turn those standards as mandatory, for example, and they become regulations, or sometimes, some things that are voluntary, they always are kept voluntary, and things that are mandatory, they always kept mandatory. In particular, of course, when we're dealing with things on life and death, and normally technical regulations already start as mandatory. And finally, the third type of measure are conformity assessment procedures, which are the easiest to understand, of course, because they are the methods that countries use to assess if those specifications and standards have been complied with. It's a very easy to understand definition, but in fact, we know by studies and evidence that actually conformity assessment procedures can be one of the most impactful in terms of trade barriers of the three TBT measures, because they involve, a multitude of different procedures, right? Because from the point of view of an importing member, if you have adopted a toy regulation to address children's health and safety, you don't want to only take the word of the importer. You want to certify very accurately that those specifications have been fulfilled, and because if you don't do that, maybe people will be harmed or even killed. So there is various levels of certification, from very simple self-certification to third-party certification that can be very complex and burdensome, but they may be justified, of course, if they are proportional to the risk. So, and that involves also national quality infrastructure. It involves access to laboratories, to accredited certifiers. So, and that's the reason why the way a member establishes its certification procedure, if it is not, calibrated for different risks and levels of complexity, can create really big barriers to trade from the point of view of certification of importers trying to show the importing market they have their products are safe and they are certified. Now, moving to, of course, this is a very quick overview of everything that the TBT agreement does. I'm leaving, of course, transparency to my colleague Angela as a big pillar. But let me move quickly in this last 10 minutes or to the TBT committee. Again, the TBT agreement, the TBT committee is special among most of the other bodies of the WTO, as we see, because of its unique practices. It's one of the goods agreements committees under the Council for Goods. So, and that actually, I'm explaining the TBT and SPS together because they work very similarly, and I think it's important for you, but I won't explain in details SPS, of course, but it's important to know that if you have a better understanding of how TBT committee works, you have a good understanding of how the SPS committee works. And many times, a company is dealing with, for example, food products, they may face TBT and SPS issues when they're exporting. So I think it's important to bear in mind also the SPS agreement and SPS committee. So the TBT committee gets together formally 3 times a year, always here in Geneva, and now virtually. And because the WTO is only here in Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland, we don't have any other offices around the world, unlike other international organizations. The TBT committee is special in many ways. First, who is attending? Of course, you have the people from the missions of the 160 members in the missions in Geneva, but uniquely, it's very common that the capitals send the experts to also come to the TBT committee and discuss, because as I said, TBT covers so many different types of issues, from computers to animal, for food, for agricultural products, labeling, can be telecommunications. So many is not uncommon for members, including developing countries, to form their delegations in the committee with people from Geneva, diplomats, and from the mission, negotiators, but also technical experts from standardizing bodies, from the regulatory agencies, and that enriches a lot the debate in the committee. Also, we have a very wide range of observers, many international standardizing bodies, Codex Alimentarius, international organizations, OECD, World Bank, that also are very participative and again, enrich a lot the work of the committee. Now, the main areas of work, and here again, I repeat again this, the fact that TBT is kind of unique, because the way the TBT committee works is very practical, discussing things that are affecting the here and now. And this is taking place, for example, under this practice of specific trade concerns that I will explain shortly. But also the committee has also these thematic sessions that are not about discussing specific measures of members that are trade irritants and creating friction, but they're about exchange of experience horizontally in terms of regulatory concerns or new regulatory fields, one country trying to learn from the other. And it's through these thematic sessions that experts come and regulatory agencies come from different members, and they discuss different topics that I will show. The third one, it's kind of a legislative, but it's not. It's not creating new binding obligations, but it's about adopting very substantive, valuable, and practical and useful guidance, giving a lot of more detail on what the agreement already said. So, for example, we have the agreement in Article 5, lots of obligations on conformity assessment. As I mentioned, conformity assessment, the way you do it, if you don't do it well, you may not only have a good certification system, but you may have a system that through certification is creating unnecessary barriers to trade. So in 2024, the committee adopted very substantive, detailed guidance on how best countries can design, adopt, and apply conformity assessment procedures. So also TBT committee is useful in this way. That keeps the agreement very lively, very dynamic. It's not like the TBT agreement was adopted in 1994 and that's it. That's the end of history. On the contrary, through this guidance and debates and exchange of experience, the TBT agreement, because regulation is also a dynamic creature, because regulations are being applied every day, and the world is dynamic, even more with digital technologies and this digital economy. And so all of this together keeps the agreement very, very lively and as close as possible to the reality, rather than just reflecting what has happened in 1994. One important point, I think sometimes a picture can say more than 1,000 words, is that when you put together all this transparency, these practices, in particular specific trade concerns that I will explain a bit more shortly, together, you see that members really, really value these tools, because this inverted pyramid, which is a data of TBT and SPS jointly, almost 100,000 TBT and SPS notifications, but which potentially each one could be a trade irritant, would create some trade problems. But through specific trade concerns, through transparency, and all this guidance together, you have, in the end, in the side of TBT, only really 12 disputes really that went to the end with a panel report on TBT issues. So I think there is this filtering effect of all these tools of the TBT committee and the agreement working synergistically and in a virtuous cycle to all conspire in a positive way to really address all of this, really without having to go through litigation. And that's the reason why the practice of STC is important. I just had here some slides on the participation of Jamaica in terms of notification and STCs, but maybe Angela will present that. But if not, just a one picture here that shows that over time Jamaica had made 180 notifications, but I think since 2017 it has been a bit more consistent with notifications. But as was said by Ambassador Reid, of course, as a developing country, there are challenges on transparency, and I think we hope that with this technical assistance and the e-ping and our tools, this help overcome a little bit these understandable difficulties on transparency. In terms of specific trade concerns, Jamaica had participated, raising 3, supporting 1, and as I responded, only one plastics. The 3 STCs that Jamaica, concerns that Jamaica raised were all about alcohol specifications, in particular for rum. But what are those specific trade concerns? They are this practice that they allow member to come to the TBT committee collectively, and I think I will show all here in one picture. Collectively, they raise this concern before all the other 165 members, and you explain why you have a problem with a measure, a regulation that the other member has proposed or has already adopted, and then you have a big, frank, technical, open, cooperative, non-litigious discussion to see what the problem is, and many times the problem is solved. You have here a list of all the different benefits, but I think what I wanted to show better than that is the statistics from 1995 to 2005 on the type of issues that come up and the types of concern that are raised. So many times the concern another member brings to the TBT committee from a measure of another member. So for example, as I said, Jamaica raised 3 specific trade concerns, and for example, one on India, or for example, Brazil on specifications of spirits. Many times the member just wants clarification. Like you ask, I really don't understand why your new requirement for distillation, why you're doing this way, why is not the other way. And many times there is a classification. You see in the statistics here, many times it's just about request of clarification, but ambiguity and lack of information itself is a big barrier from the point of view of alcohol exporters, rum exporters in this case. So it's not only about you are violating the agreement, I wanted to change completely your measure, or please do not adopt this regulation. Many times it's that, but many times it's just a good place in which you just ask questions. And it has a multiplication effect in the sense that maybe you forgot or you didn't realize that there was this measure that could affect your product is raised by another member, and that response can help you as well. So it's a kind of a collective group therapy, let's say that. But of course, many times, it's very common, for example, that you will say, wow, there is an international standard, why you didn't use it? One important element is, as Angela will mention, is the fact that because TBT is centered on draft measures way before they are adopted, it's much easier to discuss and change and address problems with respect of something that have not been adopted, as opposed to a regulation, a law, a standard that had already been adopted, right? Things are more malleable when they are just drafts. In terms of objectives, understandably, of course, a major type of measure that are subject to specific trade concerns are measures that are aimed to protect human health and safety. Is understandable because normally those measures are more stringent, right? And so it's quite common. Protection, environmental measures, quite common as well, labeling, of course, but there is a big biodiversity of objectives, of measures being subject to specific trade concerns. This is just for 2025. It's just a snapshot of specific type of group of products. In 2025, it's interesting, big group was electrical and mechanical products, but historically, as I said, the agricultural products and food products and beverages quite a big group. But you see that, year by year, sometimes there are more emphasis. As I said, I think one area that we're seeing more and more discussed, and I think this is an issue now for everybody, is not only for developed countries, is digital related regulation standards, including artificial intelligence. So I think this is an area that is a growing concern. Now, as I mentioned quickly, another important work area is adopting guidance. It's not amending the TBT agreement, it's not adding new obligations, but rather to give more clarity and help members with more details on what is already in the agreement. So, as I already mentioned, these important guidelines on conformity assessment, we had in 2002 and 2000 a very important guidance on the 6 principles for international standards, how we really separate good international standards from, international standards that have at least minimal, the respect of minimal important principles, including developmental dimension, that they are constantly updated, that they are based on consensus, that they are open, etc. And a third area I already mentioned as well is these thematic sessions, which are really important and useful, in which members, they agree that every 3 years in triennial review, this is when the agreement sets its agenda for the following 3 years. They agreed on many different topics, regulatory challenges they want to discuss. It's a good barometer to see where members are trying to go in terms of new regulatory areas or new regulatory challenges. So in the last triennial review, they included many things on critical and emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, and also lots of environment-related regulatory issues. As I said, and on the 7th of July, we're going to have a thematic session on biotechnologies for agricultural products, on use of international standards, for renewable energy and production and storage, for biotech, for climate change in buildings, for ion lithium batteries. So it's a very, very rich discussion. It's important for you to know that for each thematic session, so for example, this on plastic regulations, we create a web page in which is open for all stakeholders. So this is, while the TBT committee is only open for, physically, personally here for member countries, these thematic sessions, at least virtually, you can go to the dedicated web page, and private sector, everybody can go and watch live in the YouTube channel link. And then that's recorded. You have access later to a report, a summary report, which is public, and all presentations and materials. So this is just examples of past ones. Those are the 3 ones I mentioned that are coming up in 7th of July. Apologies here because it was with the old dates, but because of the G7 here, the TBT committee was moved to 7th July. So you still have time to watch live if you're a government official attending remotely. You can participate in Interplify and pose questions. If you're from the non-governmental side, you can watch via YouTube, but the only caveat is that you cannot pose question. Sorry, maybe it's a lot of things to be said in 40 minutes. I would leave maybe 10 minutes for Q&As, maybe 5, because I think I have exceeded a little bit to 5 minutes, but of my allocated time for presentation. This is a picture of the TBT committee delegates and the Director General in an event we had in 2024. But I want to end with this, thinking about 2020, 2030 for Jamaica, hoping that you participate and thank you so much for your attention. And I'm happy to take any questions if there is time. Otherwise, no problem. We can move straight to my point.
Thank you, Lauro. So do we have any questions in the chat at this time?
I'm not seeing
write
it.
if they want it. I will be. I can stay here during the time for Angela. And if anybody has any question, they can write, and then I can come back again in the end, if that's helpful.
All right, so participants, keep digesting the material, and if you have any further questions, we still have an opportunity after Angela's presentation. I see one in the chat.
Yeah.
Has Jamaica ever raised a concern?
Yeah. No. Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't think Jamaica, this is not so I think it's an important question. I thank you, because it allows me to maybe I rush too fast on STCs. So again, STCs are not disputes. True, sometimes, or it's not infrequent, that something that is discussed in the TBT committee as an STC first may go on and then becomes a formal dispute. So for example, one of the latest disputes we had, actual dispute with panel and appellate panel report, is this palm oil case on biofuels of Indonesia and Malaysia against the European Union on the Renewable Energy Directive 2. But that's not necessary. What STCs are not about disputes, they are non-litigious. They are regulatory cooperation, regulatory exchange of concerns, all aimed at clarifying doubts, solving problems, but in a non-litigious and cooperative way. But of course, sometimes, members, I think there is an art in raising STCs, right? So that's the reason why I think we had a mandate, and the Secretariat, or I think members want us to adopt a kind of a guide or a manual on the best practices to raise specific trade concerns. But the idea is that there is no judge, there is no judgment in the end. You just put out in the open your concern, and in good faith, everybody, open-mindedly, they engage in discussions. Of course, when members bring the specific trade concerns, they are being prompted by their private sector. And this is important. This is why it's also very important that domestically, each country coordinated the inputs. So when they come to the TBT committee, they are prepared to make the argument and show why this is a problem. And then, as I said, there is no judgment who is right or wrong, but it does work. And many times you may not get, of course, it can happen that you don't get what you wanted, but many times you get. As I mentioned, many times the only question is I don't understand what is this new requirement. Please explain a bit more what you mean. Other times the question is, well, okay, I have no problem with this new specification, but my private sector, they will have to change their production, that they need another year. So please, can you delay the entry into effect of this measure for another year? There is so many different ways. And the dispute settlement system is important in the WTO, but they don't allow this type of debate. So it's complementary in a way, right? A member will not hire lawyers and a lot of money to ask for another year. It's much more effective to go to the TPT committee. Also because you can get together with other members, right? When you bring a dispute, you are just you and another member. But when you raise a specific concern, you may see that 10 other countries support it. That creates also the environment to open the mind, perhaps, of the other side. So long response, but I hope you got the gist of the difference. There are linkages. The linkage is also in terms of avoiding that you even need to go to disputes, but it's much more than that. Yeah, I saw the other question on front of, is it front of package labeling?
Yes.
That's what they meant?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's actually important point. Of course, us from the Secretariat, we don't take positions in terms of any measure from any member. We are just facilitating member themselves to discuss and solve their issues. And but it's true, front of package labeling has been and is being discussed more and more in the TPT committee, particularly in the context of non-communicable diseases, these nutrition labelings, right? It's more even, it's not only about front of packaging labeling, or not only that, but also the traffic light, the colors, and what to say, high in sugar, salt, and fat. And here, actually, an important point is the role of the international standardizing bodies and other technical bodies outside the WTO, because if we're talking about nutrition labeling, the science is not being produced in the WTO, right? The evidence. This is done in the standardizing bodies in the international WHO, Codex Alimentarius, and they are observers, of course, of the TPT committee, and they take the floor and they share what their developments. And I know that Codex, for example, has been working on more and updated and more guidance on front of package labeling. And that just allows me to make one final point on that, on this issue. Well, two things. Back on the STCs, you can, for each STC, you have a page in which, under EPing, as Angela will mention, that you can go there and read. So if there is a front of pack labeling STC, there are various. You can go there, actually read the whole thing, and then actually learn about what are the issues, what have been solved, what hasn't been solved. And then if you want to bring your own STC with respect to another labeling measure of another member, you're already departing from that knowledge. So I think it's important. But the second point is that I didn't mention. One, and there is in this World Bank report as well, that developing countries, and the TPT agreement, actually the technical assistance rights and obligations, and in other parts says that it's very, very important, full and constant and meaningful participation in standardizing processes. So a country is not only a standard taker, is a standard maker. So because the TPT agreement emphasizes the national standards, but those standards are made outside, the agreement says you should, TPT starts even before. TPT incentivizes, encourages, and strongly encourages, and in the 6 principles as well, full participation in the international standard making process well before. Because once an international standards, for example, in front of pack labeling is done in the Codex, if you didn't participate, it won't get your input. and there's more chance that it will take into account your specific needs or your point of view. And then TBT will kick in and say, oh, now you have to use the international standard. So I think it's important as well. Things, TBT looks to the outside as well. And I think it's an important point. The other question is, how will the TBT agreement handle the influx of carbon footprinting, labeling, and eco-design requirements? So I think, one way the TBT agreement and the committee deals with that, I think, it's to avoid regulatory fragmentation and emphasizing the importance of international standard, including on carbon footprinting. I think that's one of the points. But then, more than that, because if you have 2 or 3 international standardizing bodies addressing the same thing, let's say carbon footprint labeling, then you still have fragmentation at the level of international standardizing bodies. So the TBT agreement, the TBT committee, as I said, adopted those 6 principles, and principle 5 is about coherence. Even saying, even if you have, okay, good to have international standards, so everybody's, we have a basis for addressing the same problem in the same way. But it may happen that you have also competing international standardizing bodies. If that happens, they should talk with each other to avoid redundancy, to avoid conflict. And that has actually happened. For example, the ISO, IEC, and ITU, they have adopted, for example, joint standard. Also, the TBT agreement is important to say, because you have a CARICOM cross-queue in Article 7, I think. Article 10, or I forgot now the number. I think it's Article, I want to be the right, Article 9 talks about regional bodies as well. Huh? Regional bodies of certification, but also regional standards. So sometimes coherence can happen. The ideal is internationally, but can happen also at the regional level as well. It's better less fragmentation, but not total elimination fragmentation, but at least you have at the regional level, and maybe you can adapt to the standard to your regional reality. On this as well, as I said, we're going to have these thematic sessions on energy storage, international standard for storage and production, and climate change in buildings. That I think this issue of carbon footprinting will be also discussed. So I recommend who posed the question to attend, if not in person, if it's not a delegate, to attend virtually. Thank you for your questions, all great questions.
All right, so we're going to have another video before we move into the next presentation.
EPING was created to solve a problem that WTO members brought to us. When we receive notifications, product requirements essentially, they needed to disseminate this as widely as possible to their private sector and to any stakeholder with an interest in that product for trade.
Esta plataforma permite generar diálogo entre aquellas entidades interesadas en una notificación en particular, puesto que les permite intercambiar información, comentarios, aprehensiones respecto a la regulación que está pronta a implementarse. Uno de los principales beneficios y desafíos son presentar a tiempo dichos comentarios y así evitar de manera oportuna una posible barrera no arancelaria.
Recently, the European Union had a regulation in cocoa. And this was very important for Trinidad and Tobago because we export to that market. The industry being able to get the notification directly, they were able to receive this notification in real time. They were able to sit among their peers and industry colleagues, discuss how it could affect their business with the EU and come up with a collated position to then submit a comment through the EPING.
Revenue to BIS.
The Philippines is a big exporter of automotive parts, and we can get through notifications from EPING the changes in regulations in other countries as to the specifications and the technical requirements of their needs, so that exporters would immediately know and be able to adjust the products that they deliver.
EPING tool is actually very powerful. It gives you many more functions than just an alert. And some of these very interesting functions are particularly relevant to WTO inquiry points.
The inquiry point is playing a number of roles. Ensure the stakeholders are trained and registered on how to use the EPING. Monitor regulatory developments in other WTO members. The inquiry point is also involved in initiating discussions of relevant notifications that are disseminated within the EPING with the stakeholders in the private sector.
I encourage you all to use this platform, and best of all, it's also free. So please join the EPING ecosystem.
All right, so we'll now have Angela speaking more about the EPING with her presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So today I will show you how EPING could help you anticipate regulations instead of reacting to them using real-world examples. So first, as you notice in the first video, the core message from this video is simple. EPING is an early warning service, and it turns transparency into something usable, alerts, access to draft measures, and a way to engage before rules are final. So everything we'll do today builds on that idea, getting time back to prepare and coordinate. So regulatory changes can affect trade before businesses are ready. It can be a new labeling rule for wine or food products, a new pesticide residue requirements for fruits, new safety standards for automotive parts, new energy efficiency requirements for refrigerators, as well as other examples that Lauro recently shared with us. So how transparency can help anticipate regulations, avoid surprises, and act in time. We know that most trade problems do not start at the border. They start months earlier when draft regulations are published and not seen by those affected. Transparency provides time and predictability for everyone involved. So that means for businesses, early awareness on new technical testing or labeling requirements that allows them to prepare, adapt, and avoid unnecessary costs of disruptions. For regulators, delegates, etc., government officials, it creates a space for dialogue, coordination, and better designed measures before rules are final. So this is why notifications are not just paperwork. They are early warnings that help identify and solve potential issues upstream. And tools like EPING make transparency practical by ensuring the right information reaches the right actors early on, so both policy objectives and trade flows are protected. Now, EPING turns transparency into usable trade intelligence for all stakeholders. Notifications are not abstract. They cover concrete issues like food safety limits, labeling rules explained before. So by providing early access to draft regulations, you can allow businesses and governments to prepare in advance, ask questions in committee meetings through their delegates, and avoid last-minute surprises. So in short, EPING makes regulations visible, predictable, and actionable, visible early enough to act. Okay, now EPING supports the full transparency process from early alerts to international follow-up. First, when a draft regulation is notified to the WTO, EPING immediately alerts all stakeholders, that I mean businesses, regulators, trade officials, delegates, etc. At the national level, stakeholders review the measure and share feedback through the inquiry point, which will coordinate and consolidate comments. And these comments are then sent to the notifying member, and if needed, concerns can be discussed, trade concerns can be discussed at the TBT committee as explained by Laura. So that means in practice that regulators, all the different stakeholders, trade officials, businesses, all work together early on rather than reacting after adoption. Now I would like to show you 3 examples on areas that could be of interest for you as importer or exporters. So here we see the transparency in action. That means members notifying to the WTO early on the draft measures. In this case, is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, who has submitted a notification on import policy for milk and milk ingredients in food. They will provide information on the products affected, including the HS codes. They will mention also why they are notifying this measure, the objectives. Here is to protect animal health, and what this notification means. In this case, they adopted a risk-based approach, and this puts products into 2 buckets. It means there are 2 changes to be made on consumer prepackaged shelf-stable food beverages with milk ingredients are exempt from zoosanitary certificates, while bulk or non-shelf stable products require veterinary certification. So this measure was notified to the WTO as a draft SPS measure with comments accepted up to entry into force. And this information is here. The proposed date of adoption, the date of submission. In general, is 60 days to comment. This is as a general practice. They also indicate the relevant international standard associated with this proposed regulation. And also in this example, under Section 11, we see that this notification has been marked as trade facilitating here, which means that certain requirements have actually been relaxed. So why it matters? Because many processed foods include milk powder or whey, and previous product classification will be required to know when certification applies and avoid border delays. So you can use EPING to find this type of notifications, not the comment adoption dates here. Follow the original regulation, link to confirm current import conditions before shipping. You can also save alerts for these specific notifications, or notifications related with milk, zoosanitary for future alerts, or engage with stakeholders, ask questions to inquiry points. Okay. So with these examples, we see that by using EPING, stakeholders can see these changes early, track updates, and prepare before the products reach the border. Now, let me show you a second example. Here, the European Union Plans to lower maximum residue limits for the pesticides, carbenzazim, and thiophanato-methyl across a wide range of foods, cereals, some fruits and vegetables, and certain animal origin products, as indicated in section 3 here. So the change follows Codex. Here it's indicated in section 8. It follows Codex decisions and would set many maximum residue limits down at the limit of quantifications. The comments are due by April, were due in early April 2026, with adoption targeted for early July, as indicated here in section 10, and entry into force 20 days later, well, 20 days after publication, then application a few months later. So this notification raised several trade concerns in March at the SPS committee meeting from all trade partners such as LATAM members, Canada, Kenya, and Dominican Republic, on the impact of rapid maximum residue limits reductions on exporters, asking for sufficient transition time and clarity on the scientific basis of this notification. So this example illustrates how notifications in IPING allows early dialogue also between trading partners through the specific trade concerns mechanism, the SPS committee meeting, in this case, and avoid escalating into future disputes. Also, a corrigendum was issued to correct information under section 11 later on. Now, let's move to the last example. Here, this is a notification from Canada about clean fuel, here on the title, clean fuel regulations that will require fuel suppliers, such as producers and importers of gasoline and diesel, to gradually reduce the greenhouse gas emissions linked to their fuels from 2022 to 2030. So the measure places duties on fuel producers and importers to meet yearly reductions and use a credit system. The aim here is explained in section 7, is to make fuels cleaner, encourage the use of low carbon alternatives such as biofuels, support cleaner technologies, and help Canada meet its climate targets. So members were invited to comment on the proposal by 4 March 2021, as indicated here in section 10. Okay. Also, this regular notification resulted in 4 amended addendums, versions, that were later issued by Canada, reflecting clarifications and adjustments on scope, land use, and biodiversity criteria, and methods for calculating reductions. And all these amendments also may be based on engagement with the stakeholders, comments conveyed through the inquiry points. So as you see here, IPING can help you track the original notice here, and each following update, download the attachments, the notified documents, and set alerts in the IPING notification platform. Now, I would like to show you that since 1995, over 100,000 notifications have been submitted. This volume makes manual tracking impossible. And without tools like IPING, no delegation, company, or secretariat team can realistically follow this volume. So transparency is therefore not just about publishing information. It is about ensuring that the right actors actually see relevant changes early enough to react. So with this volume, the real challenge is not to access to information, but visibility at the right time, which is where tools like IPING become essential. So here I show you some IPING activity on Jamaica, very limited on SPS notifications, and a clear rise in TBT notifications from around 2020 onwards, with peaks in the early 2020s, indicating growing engagement with TVT transparency over time. So this pattern shows where transparency efforts have been more active and where there may be still untapped potential. Now, let me show you how ePIN connects W transparency obligation with real users. So first, as it was mentioned in the introductory video, ePIN is free. It's a free online platform where you can search notifications, trade concerns, and receive alerts. It is global, can be accessed by anyone around the world. It provides real-time updates on changing products requirements, and it connects public and private sector stakeholders. So who are the users of ePIN? As it was mentioned by our director, Mr. Hu, one notification does not reach one person. It reaches an entire ecosystem. You see here that ePIN globally has over more than 3,000 users, and around 45 of them are government officials, 40% come from the private sector, and the remainder are researchers and international organizations. In Jamaica, there are 118 registered users, but some users have not logged in since the launch of the new platform in 2022, and we encourage them to reactivate their account. So most come from government institutions with additional users from standards, bodies, companies, universities, and other stakeholders. So this mix reflects how transparency works in practice, connecting public and private actors around the same regulatory information. So just to share our latest information, ePIN, of course, helps users to be alerted on upcoming notifications, but also help, for example, your potential trade partners to know about your specific market of interest. Actually, currently, 270 users have selected Jamaica as market of interest. So what can users actually do on ePIN? Regardless of the role, users tend to use ePIN in three main ways: to monitor, coordinate, and engage. So trade officials, standard bodies, delegates who attend SPS TVT meetings, regulators use ePIN to monitor incoming measures, to prepare national positions, support committee discussions, and submit or follow up on notifications. Private sector users, for example, mainly rely on alerts to track target markets, anticipate compliance requirements, and raise questions through national inquiry points before costs arise. The national notification authorities and inquiry points use ePIN to draft measures, coordinate national inputs, and act as a central contact between domestic stakeholders and the WTO transparency system. While researchers and international organizations use the same information to track regulatory trends over time. So here the key point is that the same transparency information supports very different needs, which is why versatility is one of ePIN's strengths. Most of these functions, at least on the Stay Informed section, are available for any visitor, any guest of the platform, but there is a real encouragement to create accounts to benefit from additional advanced features, such as the subscription to alerts or notifications, to save your favorites, to access to an official translation of draft regulation, etc. Also, communication, reach out and submit notifications features. Access depends on the user role. These features are accessible to notification admins, outreach admins, and admins with submission and drafting notification rights. So today I will bring you through a typical user journey, starting from how to register, find specific notifications, select products and markets, monitor your notifications for the future, and get informed through alerts on potential corrigendums, addendums on specific notifications. Also understand a little bit what that notification means. So how transparency works in practice into a notification, which type of information to look first to understand if this notification is relevant for you, and also how to coordinate to share with stakeholders which tools are available in the platform for you to help you share information with private sector and also with inquiry points. And also with this understanding of this notification, what to do, how to act, prepare your comments or follow up at different levels. So now let me show you, go through the platform. So ePing is an early warning and information sharing system, as I said before, that helps users track notifications, engage before measures are adopted. So this is the ePing homepage, which is designed to give quick access to transparency information. And from here, users can search notifications, look up for trade concerns, or subscribe to alerts based on their interest. So I will briefly show you how users typically interact with the platform. For example, taking as an example, the ROM. Okay, so maybe I will stop sharing this presentation, and now I will share another window. Maybe I will show the full screen. Let me just a little bit start moving the corresponding windows. To show you the platform in action. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we're seeing
Yes,
the
we're seeing
ePing
it,
platform.
Perfect. So we'll start with the user journey, starting from registering. As I mentioned before, any visitor can, of course, access to the information, the homepage, notifications, and do some search, limited search. There are no possibility to record your savings. Okay, so the first step, maybe if you want to benefit from additional features, is to create an account. So to create an account, you need to click here on the top of the menu, top right menu, and click on register. And this will bring you to this registration form organized in 3 sections. The first one is for your personal information, where you need to add your country, organization name, etc. The second is more related with potential products and markets of interest that you can already define in your profile. And the third section, you would like to receive these alerts based on your general preferences. So here, for example, you can add information on general products of interest and markets. If you know the HS keyword criteria to look for specific HS codes or ICH codes, markets of interest, you type your market of interest. And the area is if you are interested by TBT, SPS, or you leave it as it is if you are interested by both areas. Then on the third section is where we will, how often you would like to keep engaged with the platform. Here you set up if you would like to receive daily or weekly information by email or stop receiving emails. Okay. Same for email alerts if there are discussions on the specific forums related to a notification of interest. You can also set up alerts, specific alerts for these discussion forums, any post, specific international forum or national forum on a specific notification of interest. Okay, and then the language and to agree to the term of conditions before. Then, as a regular user, you will access to notifications, trade concerns, inquiry point authorities, contact details, other documents related with TBT SPS, as well as members' profiles and notifications. But then, depending your role, you can access to extra information if you enroll, for example, and you receive additional rights, notification rights, and admin rights. I will come on this later. Okay. So we have completed registration, and now we will follow with finding information. So to find information here, there are several types of information you can look for. You have the notifications. You can find notifications, trade concerns, contact details, or other documents. So let me first show you how to find notifications. Here, for example, I have selected ROM. You are interested in ROM. And you add a ROM here. You can also use this section for basic filters to look for your information. And then the table below will be automatically updated with the notifications adapted to your keywords. Here we provide additional information on how you can use the free text search by combining words, by excluding terms, or looking for variants. And then you can use advanced features. You can also select, of course, your market of interest here and from which date you would like to look for these notifications. In addition, you can use advanced filtering to select, for example, the HS codes, as I explained before, by using some keywords. I added ROM and I selected this HS code. And objectives also, animal health, consumer information, geographic economic groups, and looking for notifications with comment period open or with only exclusively with information added to international forum, or in this case, I selected only notifications which have a related trade concern. Okay. Of course, we have also extra detailed filters that are exclusive to SPS or to TBT, such as type of measures, reasons for addenda, etc. Okay. We have also added at the bottom of these advanced filters some ready-to-use filters from top notifying members, top keywords used for SPS notifications. So here in this example, I selected ROM with HS codes related with ROM and related with trade concern, to a trade concern. Okay. Here you see, for example, if I click on this icon that indicates that there is a related concern associated with this specific notification, that you can access to the trade concern here. For example, you click here and you can click on the page trade concerns. I will bring you to the trade concern. Maybe taking time. While this is charging inquiry points, here on the inquiry points notification authorities, you can have access to SPS or TBT inquiry points and notification authorities. You can get the TBT and look for your country that is at the top of the page. And you can see that there is a national inquiry point here added. A national notification authorities is still missing, so we encourage colleagues to add this information. And for the SPS, both are already there. Okay. You can also search for other documents using some basic filtering, such as free text search, document symbol, area distribution also. So now let's come back to this concern. I don't know why it's not charged. Yeah, I know. So trade concerns needs to be reviewed and by the CRN team in the WTO before they are published. And since this trade concern has been published in January, maybe there is still some revision that needs to be done. But maybe here I can access to this one. Let me check. And while it is charging, I can show you also for this specific search, for example, country of interest, you can select a specific, only those with information added to international forum, for example, and then save these results, export the search results so you can analyze them if you are a researcher or a government official doing some analytics on these results, or you can also save it for later. And you add a name here and you save it. So then this is only available, of course, for registered users, and then you can access to your list of saved filters. Okay. You can also save a specific notification as a favorite here by using this star close to each notification. And you can access by clicking on forum when it's green, and see what inquiry points are exchanging at the international forum on this specific notification. It can be several different types of exchanges, going from I have submitted a comment to other inquiry points, or also maybe some members also use the international forum to share unofficial translations of documents. And this is where I come to unofficial translations. Maybe I will clear this filter and show you this feature. The unofficial translation allows for you to understand in one of the 3 WTO languages any notification that has been submitted and regulation in its original language to be translated in one of the 3 WTO languages. In this case, for example, for this addendum from Brazil, there is a notified document in original language, in Portuguese, that maybe you would like to read, and you don't know how to speak, you don't know Portuguese, so you can translate it in English by clicking on this icon. So this icon is close to any regular original regulation that has been uploaded in the notification, attached to the notification in PDF format. For notifications such as this one, for example, that do not have this document attached, this feature is not available. So this feature is an AI-based powered feature that will recognize the PDF and translate it into English, French, or Spanish. So you just need to click on the icon, select your preferred language, and the system will be processed and send you an email with the translated document. Okay, so this is for the unofficial translation feature. Unfortunately, I don't have the right examples to show. Maybe here, it's a pity. But in general, let me maybe show you on the trade concerns. I apologize for the delay. It seems my Wi-Fi is a little bit charged. Maybe I can show in the meantime that also regular users and also guests can access to member profiles and regular facts and figures for notifications by clicking here and here. So they can access, as it was shown by Lauro, the specific profile from their country, including SPS and TBT, export the documents for potential reports, access to the lists, and also see data specific for SPS or specific for TBT, including the tree map of HS codes associated with SPS notifications. And the same applies for TBT. Okay. Regarding the facts and figures, here really complete information on e-ping information. So here you have the total notifications throughout the years on SPS and TBT notifications, and also some top notifiers for SPS or for TBT. and additional information on objectives, the top objectives that you can use for other reportings, as well as resources with tutorials, some testimonials, frequently asked questions that you can consult. Okay. Now, for the, see here, I don't know why it's not, I'm not accessing, strange. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, you can access to also access to the forum, the international forum. The international forum is available for anyone. It's completely public, where you can consult the exchanges on each specific notification. And there is also a national forum. And this national forum needs to be made available by the notification admin to all users, all nationals. So if it's not enabled, it cannot be accessed here as an additional tab. And on the national forum, nationals, users from a specific country, can access to this forum and post questions, queries as clarifications on a specific notification. And this notification, this information is collected by the National Inquiry Point, which coordinates all these type of comments, aggregate them, and they will send it to the corresponding member. Now let me show you a feature that is specific to admins, and this relates to, so we explained how to find, how to monitor, to set up alerts, and save your alerts so you receive notifications to monitor your searches. And then also maybe how to understand, yeah, I forgot to mention this, how to understand the specific notification. For example, when you have a notification like this one, there are several areas that are important to check first. So first, of course, the notifying member, and then the products covered, maybe. I will check first the products covered. Then also the objective, in this case, protection of human health or safety and quality requirements, and a little bit of description. Sometimes also, here we see the document. This is the original document attached. And also the final date for comments, section 10 in this case, and who to contact, which is always available at the end of the notification. So these 4 or 5 fields allows you already to see if this information is meaningful for you. Now, to coordinate, how to share with stakeholders, I show from a regular use perspective that you can coordinate by going into the search notification and clicking a forum when it's green. A forum is enabled. You can, of course, ask queries and engage with national inquiry points on specific notifications, but you can also questions through the in 2 ways. You can go here, for example, to the inquiry points notification list and select your national inquiry point and contact them via email. Or recently we have launched the beta version of a new feature. Contact your inquiry point with comments, questions directly from the notification list. So now this new feature is in beta version. That means we invite all users to test it and send us your comments to eping@wto.org. We can still fine-tune the feature. So here you click this email icon, and in addition of the regular message to send, to share this notification with any recipient or other emails, users without account in ePing, you can now contact your inquiry point in here. So it will bring you directly the address of your national inquiry point. That's why we invite the Jamaica to complete the information. So this will not be empty for any of the notifications. Click here, you add your question, clarification, feedback. You can also attach a file and you send to the National Inquiry Board. So we are very enthusiastic about this new feature, and we invite you all to test it and send us your comments. Then this is from the regular side of the users, but we have also the admin side, and this is here where you can access to reach out other users to coordinate this information. So for those notification outreach rights, they can click, they will see this option here under this section called admin panel, and they can access to this page. In here, they have the possibility with the specific users, nationals, or users from other countries, engage in admin chats. Also, they can, for example, reach to specific national users and add it to specific groups and send emails. They can also create a list of non-registered contact, non-registered stakeholders to encourage them maybe to create an account in ePing. So you have everything in the same place for you to coordinate the information before you send to other members. And you have also this feature to create groups where you can add groups, rename, delete, and add groups based, for example, on areas of interest, on sectors of interest. In this case, I have an example of coffee. Maybe you can create groups of users that have, for example, selected as area of interest rum or milk or species or etc. And last but not least, this national forum setting. As I explained it before, this national forum is only available if it's enabled by the outreach admin. So in this case here, both national forums are, but when they will be, if they are enabled, you will be able to access here on the forum section. Okay, so coordination, share with stakeholders, and now how to act, prepare comments, or follow up. And this is when you can act by using these features, so by starting a chat with users, using the national forum, the international forum between national ePing users. And also you can, for example, you have systems also for notifications admins here under submit notifications, where you can manage users and grant them notification rights or drafting rights for them to submit notifications, to work on the notifications. And this is what is important also is also when you read the search for a notification, you filter, you analyze, you act. That means you comment on the notification, you contact the inquiry, you use this email feature to share notification, to ask clarifications that then will be relayed by national inquiry points to delegates, which then can also raise your concerns, your questions at the SPS or TBT committee. And this is where transparency takes action, no? From making the information available early and also explaining what are their objectives, what is the due date for you to comment, and also allowing national inquiry points to coordinate all this information, to merge all this information and share it with other stakeholders via the SPS TBT committee, SPS committee, etc. Now, now I will show briefly another feature that is only for notification admins with submission rights and drafting rights. Here, for example, is this is available here from the dashboard, from the submit notifications, where they can select the notification they would like to submit. Okay. Information about the different guidelines or notification formats is available here. We explain what is a regular notification, revision, addenda, under which conditions you create which one of them, and how you can fill the different fields here into this notification that are then into something, a document, an official document like this one. Okay. Some best practices, maybe I would like to explain quickly, to be concise, to align the information, use keywords also in the titles, in the description, to be consistent, coherent, maybe avoid duplicating information in terms of dates. When you see, for example, that you propose a date of adoption, there is no need to duplicate the information here under the free text. It's related with dates. When you tick 60 days, there is no need to add 60 days here. So there are some best practices that allows to facilitate, to make your notification not only at the right moment, but also easy to understand by all type of stakeholders, so they can quickly identify if this notification is meaningful for them. Okay. Now, let's move to the another video that I would like for colleagues to share from Mrs. Pauline Bastidon, Chair of Food Drink Europe Trade Expert Group. It's a testimonial on how they experience the EPING platform and the TBT agreement. I will stop sharing.
The WTO TBT agreement is one of the most useful tools we have at our disposal as part of the WTO rulebook. It really supports business in 3 ways. First, by helping us through notifications, gaining essential knowledge about upcoming rules and regulations, as well as adopted rules and regulations, which help drive compliance and also help companies better adapt to new rules and requirements. Secondly, it also supports good policy making by allowing everyone to have a say, to contribute, to share recommendations.
From my side, I cannot hear. I don't know if it's the case of one.
Standards in terms of
Everybody?
legislation needing to be science-based, evidence-based, proportionate, and not trade restrictive. Finally, the TBT agreement really helps in terms of preventing trade tensions, in terms of helping out, smoothen the path to implementation of new rules, regulations, and standards, and preventing trade disruptions in order to have smoother trade for the benefit of all.
All right, thank you. So that concludes our
I will just
presentation.
complete this one. Maybe can you see the presentation now? Okay. Just to summarize, that this is simple. Transparency delivers when rules are science-based and stakeholders engage early on. And using WTO TBT notifications to comment on measures with proportionate evidence-based standards helps improve regulations, compliance, and prevent avoidable trade frictions. So before I conclude, there's one thing to remember today. It is this: EPING saves time. It turns transparency into early and actionable trade intelligence, so users can anticipate change and act in advance. So before reacting to regulation, check EPING. Chances are it started months ago. So I invite you to subscribe to a topic of interest, and for transparency-related questions, of course, you can contact us at eping@wto.org. So that's all from my side. And I'm very happy to take questions, if any.
Thank you so much, Ms. Suter. Do we have any questions in the chat?
So I'm not seeing any questions just now in the chat.
Right, so if there's no further questions, I encourage you to interact with the e-ping. And if you have any challenges, please reach out to us. We'll connect you to WTO. We'll provide any clarification you need. So please start to interact with e-ping and take advantage of all the information that is available there. So thank you again to our two main presenters. If there are no further questions at this time, we'll move into the closing. So as we come to the end of today's webinar, I'd love to extend sincere thanks to our presenters, Lauro, and Blanca Angela Zuta, for sharing their knowledge and expertise and for helping us better understand the WTO TBT agreement as well as the e-ping notification platform. Thank you also to our reps from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, as well as the BSJ for their presentations on the roles and functions of the inquiry point and the notifying authority. To you, the participants, thank you for your participation and engagement. I know we gave a lot of information today, but I hope you were able to, absorb some of it, and it will stimulate further engagement in this whole process with WTO and the e-ping. Thank you for your questions and your interest that you've shown just by participating today. We're really grateful that you were able to join us. And the BSJ remains committed to supporting you, our stakeholders, through information sharing, capacity building initiatives, and technical assistance designed to strengthen Jamaica's competitiveness and participation in global markets. So again, we encourage you to stay connected with us and to participate in our future webinars, our training sessions, our stakeholder engagement activities. And should you require additional information or support, please feel free to contact us at the BSJ. Blanca also shared the link for the e-ping, so please visit the website, learn more, sign up, get the information, inform yourself, and thank you again for joining us today. I hope you have a pleasant rest of the day and continued success as you interact with WTO, the BSJ, and e-ping. The webinar is now adjourned.